A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu-Shampagi. Like we said last week when we were ending last week's show, we're wishing you a happy reception of Pope Francis and congratulations on successfully hosting him without any major incident. We'll do the postmortem later. We'll be looking at the media coverage of the Pope's visit, but more broadly we'll continue with the subject we've been discussing over the last 3 weeks, which is the media and the 2016 general elections. During the course of the week, the African Center for Media Excellence released a report of tracking media coverage of the 2016 elections, covering especially the months of September and October, and some interesting results in there: who's getting the most media, who is giving the most media coverage, especially in terms of the media houses, and what is the slant of that coverage. We will be going into that. Let me introduce in studio tonight Dr. Peter G. Mwesige. He is the Executive Director of the African Center for Media Excellence. Doctor, very nice to have you once again.
Thank you, Charles. Good evening, viewers.
Onapito Ekomoloit, Corporate Affairs Director of Nile Breweries, SB Miller. Ona, very nice to have you once again.
I thought you were going to say the Pope's namesake.
Pope Francis.
he adopted the name afterwards. Otherwise it was called Bargoglio. Bargoglio, I think.
That's right.
We have Gerald Walulia. Gerald Walulia is a lecturer at Makerere University in the Mass Communications Department, and is also a PhD student. Gerald, very nice to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Charles, for hosting me, and good evening, viewers.
And making a return after long absence, Chris Oboe, Corporate Affairs Director at, Director Communications and Public Affairs.
Yes.
Yes, at the Parliament of Uganda. Chris, very nice to have you
to bring the guy to my level when this title is much.
Chris, very nice to have you.
So we have two veterans on one side, and I edited you.
Yes, you did.
I edited him as monitor. The other two are in a different league. So you say veteran versus they are what?
And where do I belong?
You belong
in the middle. You're in the middle.
I belong in the middle. I'm in the middle. I'm actually well balanced out between the four of you. We'll be looking at that. These guys also share a history of founding a newspaper called The Crusader, but they also worked at the Monitor. They thought they were reporters, they were editors, they taught mass communication, and now they're in a different managed newspapers.
We actually share the class in different capacities.
Yeah.
The only thing Peter hasn't done is serve the president.
I have served him as a critic.
served in a different capacity.
Gentlemen, let's start with the visit of the Pope. And I want to start with a personal opinion on what I think went well, which is that this visit, both in Kenya and Uganda, ended without any incident. The Pope arrived earlier today in the Central African Republic, which is the third leg and last stop of his African visit, which went very smoothly. All media went for live coverage, especially for TV. The newspapers were live tweeting and giving updates constantly, but all the newspapers have been giving nothing else apart from the visit of the Pope. Peter, what's your assessment of the coverage? Was it proportionate? Was it balanced? Was it fair?
Well, no, I think in some ways, I mean, the reporting was superficial. I mean, people were just reporting, the Pope is now here, after here is going to go there, after there is going to go here, without giving us any context. Why is this important? What does this mean? And so on and so forth. There were attempts by some newspapers and TV stations to sort of give some depth and analysis, sort of to interrogate the issue of doctrine and theology and all that. But I don't think that we did much on that front. We just kind of scratched, and we're just happy to have the Pope. The media behave like they're part of the people who are welcoming the Pope. You know what I mean? But I think the bigger story, which can be told now that the Pope is gone, left Uganda, is the one of the TV coverage. I think that there's a scandal over there that needs to be investigated. How did we end up, procuring and handing over rights to the Pope's coverage to the broadcaster they gave it to, and what went wrong? What was promised, what was actually delivered? I think it was on the verge of a disaster in terms of Uganda's image. When you look at some of the pictures we were seeing from Entebbe, on Friday. I mean, at one point I was seeing feet of people, because I think the cameraman was running. He forgot to actually, sort of direct his camera. He was just running around and showing people's feet and all that.
And that was the live feed.
Yeah. I think that we need to sort of tell that whole story. How did we end up where we are in terms of, you know, the coverage, the TV coverage? What actually went wrong? And what happened at Kololo, where Bukede TV and Urban TV, you know, kind of sort of tried to come in to save the day? What was really going on? There's a very big sort of thing that needs to be told. If not by NTV, at least by the newspapers, you know, the Monitor, the Observer,
because
and the
NTV will be competition. So
chances are, yeah, but I think that there is a big story
in
there to be told.
that story. And since we don't have the other guys to tell us, since we actually don't know what the story is, we may not be able to discuss in detail. I want to jump you and to jump Ona and Gerald and jump to Chris, because Chris, you are saying something before we came on air about the other story of the Pope's visit that we'll wait to read, hopefully, or to watch on TV or to analyze in this studio at some stage.
I know you want to, you know, now I'm a public civil servant, and I don't want you to tickle me to go to the old Chris Obore of asking if
Are you suggesting that the old Chris Obore and the Chris Obore will have a difference?
Now, if they met in this studio, they would fight.
I took an oath of public service, and I think anybody serious would respect what they have taken, the oath they have taken. I'm not here to disclose government secrets, because I'm a government employee. But what I can tell you about the Pope's visit, from a positive note, is that something happened at Namgongo. You know, there was a handshake between President Museveni and they call him his nemesis, Kiza Besigye. That was a very significant thing. If alone nothing happened, the fact that the two people were cordial and smiling, and I can see each group now is owning that handshake. The other group says it's the anointing. This group says steady peace and stability, continuity, you know, compromise, consensus. I see that running in the media. So if the Pope had not come, I bet it would have been very difficult to have the two gentlemen shake their hands. I know
and smile at each other.
And smile at each other. They are so that's the power of Christianity. That's the power of religion. So much as we try to demonize it, the coming of the Pope is reconciliatory in a way.
So the celebration that Peter is talking about is actually justified in a way, because it's that celebration, that excitement, general excitement, that creates opportunities like that picture.
But the point Peter is saying is very critical, and I'm not come here to, I'm not yet very far from journalism. The point is we must help our media industry. The media industry seems to be no one, it's a law unto itself. There is resident incompetence in our media houses. And we are not going to talk about it because they hold the power to block you out or to promote you. That is the wrong way to look at the media. The media is part and part of our society. They must be checked the very way the executive is checked, parliament is checked, and the judiciary is checked. Now what happens now, we have a problem. This guy trains people in Makerere. The newsrooms can't sustain them. The newsrooms are running away from experience, from knowledge, to hold these people to work, and they are picking anybody, any relative, anyone, and that's what ends up.
Wouldn't you say, Chris?
It ends up photographing feet when there is a serious matter. So what happens?
Chris, wouldn't you say that is actually an indictment on the panel in this studio? Peter should be in a newsroom guiding things on how they are done, with his experience, with his education, with his knowledge. Onapito ran away from the newsroom many years ago. The latest escapist. No. Your own introduction here.
Yes.
You said the veteran.
The
veteran. No, the latest escapee, because when Gerald came to the Monitor, I had been there a few years. He stayed for a few days, ran to Makerere.
You should have said a few years.
No, a few days, ran to Makerere. I was in the newsroom. Well, I'm still partly in the newsroom. Of all of you guys, at least I'm still in the newsroom doing some work there. Chris is the latest escapee from the media. Now, what do you expect these media houses to do?
Don't use language to fit. Dr. Peter Mwesigye has dedicated himself to media work. I am one of those who used to lament about his departure from the newsroom. But now that he's doing a lot of monitoring of the media, I'm beginning to appreciate that as a doctor, I mean, operational issues is above that. But there should be a cadreship that does the operation as it does the thinking. The trouble is the media houses are not absorbing the cadreship they are training. Why? And who is going to address that? Because we all fear the media. You and me have left the newsrooms. I don't think you really have loved to leave journalism. It is our vocation. What are the push factors? What is pushing away people? Onapito has done his best. Onapito by now, if you were supposed to be in the newsroom, he wouldn't have carried the camera to go to welcome the Pope. That's not his duty. But where are the people to do it? And why aren't they in the newsrooms when Gerard is teaching them every year, graduating them every year. Who are you recruiting?
Isn't the question of who actually is coming out of the training school?
No, the truth is, Charles, most media houses today are not investing in field activities. They're investing either, even those journalists feel, I am an editor, you sit there, you have no clue where Muru is. But you are now deciding content.
Just very quickly, to be fair, I mean, of course, Chris is right. I mean, most media houses are not investing enough in, but there are others. So, for instance, I know for a fact that New Vision the Vision Group spent, nearly 2-3 weeks training their journalists on how to cover the Pope's visit, including, understanding the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. Who is a bishop, archbishop, cardinal, monsignor, and so on and so forth. How do you refer to these people, and what does this whole thing mean? And I think those who watched maybe TV, some of their TV programming closely will testify that there was an attempt to do a fairly, good job. So I don't think that all is lost, but it is true that there are so many other journalists who just did not invest enough time and resources in understanding this story, its significance, its importance, and why people should care about it. Why are Ugandans excited by the Pope's visit, for instance? Why are people willing to, line up in Tere Road, Namugongo, Jinja Road, and what does this thing actually mean for Ugandans? Those kinds of questions, I think, were not answered by very many journalists.
Gerald, Gerald, before I come to Old Man Francis, who shares the name with the Pope, the question, people watching us, especially colleague journalists, watching us out there now, will be saying, can you imagine those guys hitting at us now when they were also there, they didn't do the things that they're asking us to do? When newsrooms and journalists are saying, we did make an effort to bring you the story of the Pope's visit from the start up to the end, newsrooms, including average newsrooms, had a reporter attempted to put a reporter at Entebbe, put a reporter somewhere along the way, put a reporter in Munyonyo, in Namugongo, to make sure that the story, the action is coming to you as it's supposed to be happening, including small radio stations and other places.
That's right.
Is this critique fair? Because Dr. Mwesige started with two things. The giving of the rights, supply the signal on which everyone else was speaking, is a completely different matter from the journalism that the journalists practice.
That's right.
Those are two completely different things.
Yeah.
So where is the problem? Are we being too critical of actually a lot of very young people who are trying to bring this information to their audiences, whichever they are?
I believe that some of the criticism is quite fair and granted, but we can also say that during such a huge activity in the country, there is not so much you can tell outside this main event. That's why you probably saw that even other people who were carrying out what you would regard as very important activities like campaigning were also involved, because they were risking being blacked out.
They cancelled their campaign.
Yeah, even if they were to go to campaign, they would probably not receive that much coverage or any coverage at all. So I think to some extent you can say that the media was right to dedicate so much time onto this, but probably the question is why they didn't do more than showing us the fanfare that is going on as people are welcoming the Pope. We know that many people were involved in one way or the other. Whether you were on Entebbe Road or you were sitting in your home to watch the Pope from your TV, many people were interested in this story. But we needed to see probably a little bit more on the significance of the Pope's visit. First of all, the choice of visiting Uganda rather than any other country. And then beyond that, you need to look at other issues. For instance, we are in a country where we always criticize people in leadership and government of being extravagant. And we have a Pope here who wants to live a simple life. So one could, for instance, dwell on this issue of why can't our politician live a modest life like the Pope? Instead of using a four-wheel drive car, why can't we use these simple cars?
I was provoking Chris to say something. The part of the postmortem that we'll do after the Pope's visit is the renovation works, the painting, the flowers, the pavers, the construction work at the three major places he visited, Munyonyo, Namugonga, the Catholic shrine, and the Anglican shrine, and maybe some sprucing up at Kololo airstrip and elsewhere. That's a story I'm expecting that the media will be telling us. The cost of hosting the Pope. Will that be told?
But Charles, just briefly, I find some of these things quite embarrassing, that even we know some of the things in advance, we tend to do last-minute stuff. You plant grass 2 weeks to the day, you expect people to see it grown. And for me, I find this kind of embarrassing for us as a country, and I think this is something we need to work on.
Honor, the media coverage of the Pope's visit. What's it take?
Look, Charles, first of all, I think on one hand, this was a classic case of too much of everything is always dangerous. There was an attempt by an ill-prepared media, perhaps, to cover too much of the Pope. And in the end, it became half-cooked. But also, looking critical, I watched the arrival pictures. I saw an element of uncoordinated movement of troops, so to say, between the coverage and then security and protocol concerns. That clearly was visible. I think the people in security and protocol forgot that to have a successful papal hosting, you needed to have proper media coverage, and that means the cameras should have been in a position to get, for example, during the arrival salute between President Museveni and the Pope, the camera could only get them from the side. You wouldn't see the Pope's face reacting to the anthems, to the gun salute, because I'm sure the security people did not allow the cameraman to be in a vantage position to get a frontal picture. It can be understandable, but with good coordination, you could have actually got the right camera to be where it should be without compromising security. So we might be taking a lot of bashing at the cameraman, but I see he was really on the periphery.
No, I agree.
He was struggling to give us the right picture. So that might have really been too much to expect of him. But overall, my impression is that I think this story was overdone, you know, and from really a procedural point of view, and not from the analytical point of view. Trying to give context to it, as we have all agreed, was lacking. So.
Let's just try a little bit on global coverage.
Before it gets lost,
yes.
Let's separate the dynamics during the visit. The point I was raising, why have we arrived at the situation we are in now? And I'm in for the ordinary journalists, the front soldiers. The argument is, we are not interrogating who takes care of these front soldiers. Are they actually managed to the way to produce results? Some of them are dedicating their blood to give us what they are giving. That's the argument I'm bringing about the media houses. Other than the monitor, where Tabu Butajira, an editor, was in the field, most newsrooms, senior people are busy watching on TV and throwing dictates. They are leaving a journalist to run around. They have just come out of school 1 year, 2 years. Everybody is a king and a queen of their own. They are waiting to judge stories. But Tabu Butajira, by virtue of being a journalist in him, was in Namgongo, was in the State House, and he's an editor. He's a training editor. I should take the training. The point I'm saying is the so-called senior people in the newsrooms are not leading the troops to produce a better quality. They are trying to drain these journalists. They run here, they sleep there, so they go with inequality. They go with inequality. So who speaks for journalists? This is what I'm trying to say. Let's be honest enough.
We need to be fair.
Let's be honest enough and say our journalists are operating under hardships, and we must address those hardships.
I think we'll have a show. We were discussing this before we came on air. We'll have an opportunity when we bring in editors to share with us newsroom experiences, because we may not know the challenge. And you raised something important. To get good coverage and mileage out of a visit like of the Pope, you need a 360 coordination. So concerns of protocol, concerns of security, concerns of coverage must have a meeting point. So even at the highest planning level, where is the place of the media and the key media houses that will pick that signal and cover it if you want to get exactly what you want? And
but you mentioned one thing. He said, of all the media houses, Dr. Mesji mentioned only the New Vision as having prepared to cover the Pope. He's a trainer. Why didn't he mention the others?
No, I just
maybe that's what you know.
Yeah, and that's the fact, by the way.
Maybe that's
the
what you
fact.
know.
Robert Kabushenga is on the ground. That is the fact. We can't run away from it. And that's why he prepared his troops. What was the outcome? Good coverage.
But I think, Charles,
Yes.
the other point which we shouldn't lose is honor talks about planning, coordination between security and protocol and the media. I think the same thing can be said about the media per se. Planning, it's very important. I mean, we've been there, we know this. Maybe we can ask ourselves whether media houses did enough planning, I mean, or across the board, in terms of, having dry runs, where is our camera person going to be standing, how many camera persons do we need at this place here, who's going to be relaying what, and so on, and so forth. Those kinds of things are routine, but they actually matter.
The reason, Dr. Mwesige, I am not interrogating that deeply is because we do not have someone in a newsroom who knows what efforts were being taken in that newsroom to achieve that coverage. Ona talks about
just 6 months out of the newsroom.
Extreme coverage, giving it too much attention. And I was reflecting back. 1997, the death of Princess Diana, the death of Mother Teresa, any major thing, 90 years of the Queen. The Queen will be 90 years, I think, in a few months. In a few months from now, the coverage that the world gives some of these stories. If you listen to BBC and others, they gave almost all full blanket coverage to the Papal visit to Africa. So I think that's a bit natural. With news, it's a big story.
But his point was that it was procedural and analytical and contextual.
It was just commentary. I mean, like you are a commentator and the papers arrive here.
At the risk of being biased, I want to cut these guys some slack and wait and see what happened. Is the story dropped or is it continuing? The Pope just left today. Gentlemen, we need to take a quick commercial break, and we come back. We'll be looking at the media and the 2016 elections, a discussion we've been holding over the last about 3 weeks, and we'll continue covering throughout these elections to put the media in the spotlight and ask, how exactly are we covering the 2016 general elections? Are we doing what we need to be doing? We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're discussing the media and the way we cover major events. The biggest event of this year and the early part of the next year will be the 2016 general elections. I'm being careful not to get into a discussion about the Electoral Commission and SEDU on the top of our campaign, because I'm an interested party, but also that we'll have that discussion once it matures. It hasn't matured yet. But as we launch into the media coverage and the report that ACME has released on the coverage of the presidential election so far, I'd like to get a comment from each of you gentlemen on the significance of the handshake. The last time, at least from what we know, Dr. Kizza Besigye and President Yoweri Museveni had a handshake was at a meeting of the Rukunjiri Development Association, meeting at State House in Entebbe, before Besigye contested against Museveni for the first time in the 2001 elections. I'm not quite sure, I haven't checked to confirm whether that meeting was in 2000 or in 1999. Besigye disagreed with Museveni when he wrote that paper, which the Monitor published, on how the movement had derailed, the 8-point program, I think, of the derailment in 1999. Through 2000, that's when his court-martial thing was on. And I think Jim Muhwezi was chairman of the Rukunjiri Development Association, led a delegation of the Rukunjiri Development Association to have a meeting with President Museveni to ask him not to prosecute Besigye. From what I have been able to gather, that is the last time they had a handshake. And if the handshake happened, people would have expected a stiff handshake. But this was a fairly cordial handshake. Any significance in that, especially in relation to the elections?
I think, Charles, for me, one, it is a sad commentary actually on Uganda that, first of all, the president shaking the hands of his opponent is national news. Because you see, what that tells you basically is that our politics has reached such a point that the president and his opponents are actually enemies. They cannot shake hands. They cannot behave in a civil manner. It takes them 15 years to shake hands. That in itself is a story, is for me, I think, a very big problem.
The last time Obote gave an interview, the late President Milton Obote, Andrew Mwenda asked him, if you met President Yoweri Museveni, what would you do? And Obote said, I'll poke him with my stick.
No, so I think it is really sad. I think it is sad. I think that, Besigye and Museveni and Babaze, and they work together. They could, still have retained a degree of civility in their relationship, even as they, oppose each other, on the political front. But in terms of the media, I think that was a good story. You couldn't miss that story, definitely. And I think that I wish we could get more details about how this happened, because I've heard from some people. I was watching TV. I've heard from some people that the NRM Secretary General, Lumumba, actually did take the president to greet Besigye. In other words, it wasn't Museveni, the president's, own decision to actually go over to
no, I think he had been greeting
people,
other people or presidential candidates and sort of maybe had not seen Besigye.
Yeah.
So she made sure he greeted.
Yeah.
But look, for the president, if I may just come in here, this is not by accident. One, he knows the mindset of the Ugandans. One, they have always seen him as a tough guy. He's the lion, and Ugandans want, they believe the guy is tough, the guy, So the fact that he has not been greeting these guys anyhow is what Uganda sort of actually glorified. And even when he decided sort of it's time to greet these people, it's again to send that message that he doesn't after all fear them with all the crowds they have been getting. On the other hand, for Besigye, I think it's also good for him, because the NRM has always tried to paint Besigye as this angry Besigye, And if now you have a smiling Besigye who can have a handshake with President Museveni, it means he's sort of saying he's ready to be trusted, And
he's acting presidential.
He's acting presidential, so to say. So I think both guys had something to gain out of the handshake.
Okay, Chris, you take on that handshake, because there is a subtext to the handshake that I will introduce shortly after you guys have made your comments.
There's something again we are bypassing in understanding that handshake. We are nursing a psychology in this country, which Doctor alluded to. If basically had earlier shaken the president's hand in the State House, would have been a vote. That's the thinking. That you to talk to your opponent means a compromise. So there are people out there who do not want to see consensus. So you are their leader only if you take the extreme position. The moment the two people come and talk, I say, oh, you see that there has been a compromise. And I've seen so many opposition leaders suffer that. So it makes them not view the consensus, but to try to be parallel. So when we accept, you have seen how Muntu is called a mole, anyone who tries to take a middle position and say we can disagree without being disagreeable, the same public, now with their heckling in social media, who will come up with all sorts of allegations, tell you this, as if Besigye meeting President Museveni, even when the opponent amounts to Besigye being paid. So it has stayed away people who ordinarily seek a meeting with the president and say, His Excellency, I am against you over this, can we talk? The moment you do that, he has been invoked.
Isn't that also dictated? Isn't that also dictated in part, Chris?
By what?
To the statements, by the statements the leaders themselves have made, because there was an invite to Besigye to have a meeting. There was that discussion after the 2006 elections, and said, "I can't go to have tea at State House."
And you see, leaders, political leaders, listen to the signals from those who vote them.
That's right.
And I'm telling you, we have nursed a voting population, especially among the elite, whose interest is not to see consensus develop. So if the president calls all political parties, let's go on a meeting, the first thing will be, that one has been paid. Mwangusha is gone. The other one is gone. So another one comes, who becomes an extremist.
There is also reason for that, because some people have actually gone to meet the president and they have ended up changing the trouble.
And some people have been with the president and still change the position. So this is how politics works. The trouble then is for you to expect people are deserting the president and no one joining him. This is the irony. I know people who have left the president. We all know that. And there are those who left him and gone back to the president. That is the nature of politics. It's an iterative process. It doesn't have to be cast this way. But for me,
the question of
what I'm saying, Charles, is the coming of the Pope, one, signifies the strength of the Catholic faith in this country. That none of them could afford to even miss the event. Because you are now in the election period and the population, the majority of the population is Catholic. To be seen even not to respect the vicar of Christ, you would lose terribly. So the more we begin, first of all, the Catholic Church now, the religious bodies, the other non-state actors, begin to coalesce around building consensus to determine how our political actors behave, the better for us.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the non-state actors have been also bystanders, watching the psychology develop. That President Museveni meeting Besigye amounts to an exchange of money. Then you wonder, I don't know, how do we launch a country like that?
Even just simplify this on the picture. The thing is, you all know there was recently another incident where the president ignored the former prime minister, Amama Mbabazi, walked right past him as Amama was extending his hand. Was it earlier this year or last year? I remember that picture.
I remember that picture. He was putting hand.
So if Amama Mbabazi is standing somewhere and the president is, greeting people, of course we would all be keen to actually see whether he's going to shake his hand
I think
or he's going to walk right past him.
The most recent incident was the one in Kanungu with the Archbishop of the Church of Uganda, Stanley Ntagali, where you were saying some of you are enemies because of political. You know that thing that has been making rounds on social media.
Yes. So for me, I think that that whole story is part of the context of this picture of Besigye and the president shaking hands. And actually, I wish that the reporting could cover all those little details, the history of that.
But also look, of course, both political leaders know that the Pope is really a significant world figure, and nobody wants him to go away with the impression that you are the wrong guy. An election is coming up, you all want to be seen as the right person for Uganda. So everyone felt this was neutral ground.
Yes,
they were like the Vatican.
And I think to add something small to what Chris was saying. I think the Pope visit, the way this country being extremely religious and conservative, is beyond the confines of one faith. The Pope made an earlier visit to the Anglican shrine. The Archbishop of the Church of Uganda was at Entebbe to receive him and was at both events, which made the visit, actually, as you say, much more neutral ground.
And that makes it a great commission for the religious organizations here, that it is possible for them to spearhead consensus. And it has happened that the two have shaken hands. It is possible if the church decided to say, let's determine how our people play politics.
But of course, you again run against the wall of separation of church and state, which for me, I really dismiss is nonsense. The church or religious bodies have contributed the biggest development in this country. And I think the earlier we realize that they still need to come back in the social service provision like schools, hospitals. This country will have a better chance.
Gerald, you haven't had your take. In journalism, there's something they call the photo op, standing up to the gallery. Some interpretation, of course, will be who was playing this game. Part of the other things we're not discussing is how did the presidential candidates end up positioned where they were positioned that handshake wouldn't miss them. Was it by design of their teams or by design of the organizers, and were those the organizers the state or the church? And of course, I think Kasula Lumumba, hate her or like her, she has done a few things as Secretary General of the party that have tried to mute what Chris was talking about, that any interaction is enmity. She has tried out, she was at the FDC platform launch, just behind us in the Serena, when they launched their new policy platform. And which I think is something that we haven't interrogated much. Was that for journalistic purposes, the first opportunity?
Personally, I didn't read so much into this handshake. It was more for their respective...
Coincidental or designed?
No, designed, because I wasn't at Namugongo, but I watched this video, and I saw that after greeting Amama Mbabazi, Kasule Lumumba led the president to Besigye's side, who was standing a few meters from where Amama was. So, first of all, I see that it was a PR plan on the side of NRM that Museveni is probably not as bad and aggressive to the opposition as he has been previously portrayed.
And the PR side of Besigye and the FDC? And
previously, Besigye has been criticized as having a personal issue, something to grind with the president. So I think this was also an opportunity that he was looking forward to try and clear his image that actually I have nothing between me and him. what we are contesting.
Actually, some had criticized him for not, had said earlier that day that he had not recognized the arrival of the president or something like that. So
who had it recognized?
President, I mean, basically.
Yeah.
It was said by some critics that he had not acknowledged the president's arrival earlier in the, when people stood up for the president and all that. So maybe.
Yeah, so this is something that Besigye and all other political leaders were keen to receive. Even Amama himself, it's not so often that he currently...
Before we go into the Acme report, I'm keen for us to know.
A problem, Charles, because sometimes when we put a lot of energy to try to speculate on every incident, maybe we build up what is not there. This was a religious function.
Yeah.
The point would be all of these candidates honored the religious function.
Chris,
they had to be there. Now, what if they are not going there? What would be the explanation? I think the point, Charles, is let us agree for now that all the candidates, including the president, respected an event that was at home.
There is a way
they behaved maturely. They behaved maturely.
I want to be the contrarian here.
There is a way the Pope...
Consider Chris, one of the most informed people about Eastern Uganda politics. There was an incident at also another religious event not long ago when one of the two arrived and the other one walked out. So why did they respect that?
Is that what we need to promote as a media?
No.
We promote the Namgongo.
We are analyzing. We are commenting. We are not promoting.
I am saying the two incidents happened. Which one is better?
Yeah. Okay.
So why don't we go with the best?
We need to move on. And for that reason, I'll eliminate the subtext, which was the crowd response to the announcement of the arrivals. Because that is something else that is also trending, especially on social media. There is a discussion on the cheering of the different people, including the Kabaka, Dr. Keza Messenger, Amama Mbabazi, President Yoweri Museveni, and the other dignitaries as they introduced. But let's move on. You released a report tracking, because you're doing observation of media in this election. Could you just run us through some of the highlights? Who's getting the fairest deal out of the media coverage? Is the media being professional and doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so the report we released actually was for both September and October 2015. And I think to sort of give you a summary, you know, first of all, our intention here is to sort of try and contribute to encouraging the media to, you know, have accurate, fair, and comprehensive reporting of the elections. So we want to share the reports every month with the media with the view that we can identify gaps and strong points which they can either maintain or gaps which they can address. So for the September and October reports, on the positive front, there appears, generally speaking, to have been quite a high volume of reporting from the newspapers, you know, 9 newspapers, including Monitor, New Vision, Observer, The Independent, the Oropinyi, Bukedde, and so on and so forth. There was a high volume of reporting on the elections, both presidential and parliamentary, even before nominations. There were also very many media houses, you know, the newspapers started special election 2016 platforms, you know, where they sort of covered special reports, comprehensive reports on the media and all that. That I think is commendable. On the quality front, our findings kind of suggest it is a mixed bag. On the positive side, we see so many stories with multiple sources. That is, you know, more than one person being quoted. We see also a high proportion of stories where ordinary people are used as sources, especially, you know, from the countryside. We see a good number of stories where both party and candidate agendas are included in the coverage. And we see a high proportion of stories which have background and context, sort of which show you where this is coming from and so on and so forth. On the negative side...
Just before you go to the negative side,
yes.
I want to ask, sometimes when we're discussing the media, we tend to forget or blur the line between press, give a lot more focus to the press, print media, and forget broadcast and television. Does this cut across?
The Acme monitoring is looking at both print media and broadcasting including both radio and television. The reports that we released this week, though, only focused on print media.
Okay.
In 10 days or so, we'll be releasing more reports that focus on radio and television. Yeah, so I'm saying on the negative side, there are 2 issues that really should concern all of us. One, politicians continue dominating the coverage. Ordinary people own about 10% or so of the sources of this coverage. In fact, civil society is even much lower, maybe just about 3%. So most of the sources of coverage in the media, print media, were politicians, candidates, and so on and so forth. The other one is women make up an alarmingly small percentage of the sources in newspaper coverage of the elections. And then we also...
alarmingly small percentage?
About 23%.
23%?
Yes, basically men made up more than 70% of the coverage. Then we also see a high proportion of stories where journalists do not question the promises made by politicians, or their parties or their handlers, and I think that is something that we have seen continuously all the way. So I don't know if we're going to see any changes, but hopefully we can begin to see some changes once we begin these kinds of discussions and alert our colleagues in the media that you could perhaps do more in terms of questioning what these politicians are saying. So I think, in short, that's the kind of trend we are beginning to see. Gerald was there, of course, at the
before Gerald comes in. Yeah, maybe it's a good time to bring in Gerald before we take the break. Honor and Chris, I'll bring you in after we have done the break. The report, parts of which I've seen, tends to suggest that, what do you remember? It tends to suggest who is getting the lion's share of this coverage between the major players.
By the way, sorry, Charles, before he comes in, I knew you are going to be interested in that, but see, for me, from a media perspective, as long as there is no serious imbalance, I didn't think it was very important. But otherwise, it is true that the report shows for September and October, Mbabazi and Besigye, in that order, did get more attention than the other candidates. And by the way, remember that by that time, they were not actually candidates in the actual sense of the word. They were aspirants, but they did get more attention than Museveni and the others. Yeah,
because we have had some complaints, especially from the NRM camp, that sometimes it's getting a raw deal in the media coverage. Maybe does the report help us to answer some of those questions?
But what we should also remember is that the coverage that we see in the media is a factor of the activities, the political activities that are going on. When you look at the period of September to October, this was the period of the protracted TDA talks that eventually didn't materialize. So most of these stories that we talk about are a result of these talks. And the discussion around the candidature of Amama and Besigye in the media arise mostly from those talks. So we may expect a different picture in the reports that may come after. It is the same case with the female sources. When you have few female candidates, it means that they will also become lesser sources in the media.
Okay, but I think that that is not actually the point. The point about sourcing is that you don't need to be a candidate you don't have to have a female candidate for you to have a source who is a woman. Because there are more women, for instance, who vote, I think, than men, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Should also be part of the sources.
Yes, the interesting thing about that, the BBC, for example, have been following their 100 women. There's some commemoration and some event they're trying to commemorate, and they're tracking women. And they had a discussion recently, which I listened to, of how the media is covering women. And there were some female editors, women editors, and men looking at how they had covered. And they found that when the newsmakers are predominantly men, then even the reporting is going to be skewed in favor of the men. And how, what recommendations are you making? We'll be interrogating that. If you could just finish your point. So
I think that, of course, the reporting we see is part of the society that we live in. And so the patriarchal kind of setting is still evident in the media coverage. But one overall thing I want to say about the way media is reporting about elections in Uganda, I have just been in Tanzania, where I have also been observing how they are reporting on elections. And I must say that despite the negative things that Peter's report is pointing out, I think we do quite a commendable job compared to our neighbors in Tanzania, where apart from a few media houses, each media house supported one candidate or the other, and that was directly. And the owners and the editors had no apologies for this kind of coverage.
Well, the Americans have been doing it. They don't have to apologize for that. They can take a position. Maybe that clarifies the lines, and then you don't have to doubt.
Yes,
you
can do that, but not maliciously. But sometimes the coverage was also malicious. Yes.
Okay. Gentlemen, we need to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I'll start with Chris and then Onapito. Then we'll, as we move to wind down this discussion.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate. And the Fourth Estate is focusing on the Fourth Estate and its coverage of the 2016 elections as Uganda decides. You're talking about Tanzania, and what has been trending most, I think, in Uganda is the hashtag, what will Magufuli do? Given his radical approach to doing things in his very first days in office. And Chris, the ACME report talks about the positive things. Everybody trying to create separate special coverage or specialized coverage. And I believe with the team looking at the 2016 general elections. One of the other things I think the report will, when you have an opportunity to interact with it, is the effort to give every candidate some presence in their media houses. Though that will be seen, I think, in the November report more after the nominations. The media in the 2016 elections, from your now observation point outside the newsroom, a typical newsroom, and I've seen you have authored an article in the Daily Monitor, in the Sunday Monitor today, about the reporting of Parliament and its emoluments vis-a-vis the executive.
Yeah, now I speak for an issue which has been bashed, and a group of people who have been called all sorts of names.
Where I was one of the bashers.
Yes, I was one of the bashers.
Yes.
But
someone reminded me, sorry to cut you, someone reminded me about the Omelekesi. A lot of our votes. The Anyama in action.
Yeah, because I'm now trying to put you the facts.
Yes, sure.
And that is where I'm coming from. And that's where I will again indict journalism. Yes. Journalism, the Dr. Peter Message here is the authority. You must speak from the point of knowledge. And there are some things we don't know as journalists. We must also admit. But there's a tendency for journalists to believe they know everything. And in trying to know everything, you actually don't know a lot. So when we come to even the issue of coverage this election, I still come back. Before I come back to tell you about the MPs and their pay and everything, the point is, there will never be balanced reporting in politics for as long as newsrooms do not take lead in organizing their coverage, organizing their people, and giving their people the tools with which to do their job. Most of the journalists, the truth be told, either campaign agents induce something, some of them are sent to the field by their own media houses without enough money for accommodation. The editor doesn't know when a reporter is in Bulisa, from Bulisa to Kriandongo, how long does it take? The person facilitating a journalist does not know it. Most times they give a journalist less facilitation, but they want them to go to the field. And most times the other factors come in to facilitate a journalist. That alone compromises the quality of reporting. No journalist is said, you are moving from here up to Moroto. The editor, I can tell you, is editing a story. He doesn't know how far it is from Nakapiripirit to Kotido. He thinks it is from here to Tira. And when you are trying to assign a journalist, and he's telling you, I am talking as a man who assigned the vouchers for journalists to go and do work. They tell them, cut this. If in the newsroom that is happening, let's not dupe the public that we are the ones who know what to do, we are doing our best. When in media houses are declaring profits in billions, I am speaking for the foot soldier called a journalist.
I am told of a story of an editor in a newsroom in Kampala who was demanding that pictures and the story, I think around the death of Dr. Bote, Milton Obote, saying, I want the pictures now. And the guy is saying, Akokoro is not where you can send the pictures from without this modern technology. But even today, because when you go out in the field, network can be a major problem. The man was saying, I want that story. Jump on a border, a man saying, there is no border that story.
So I'm telling you, if we have those situations, and I can say there's an economic problem for media houses, but the truth is they declare their profits in the open. Where are the profits invested? In growing the quality of journalism or in growing the shareholder value? They are taking it to the shareholder value. Then why do we dupe Ugandans that journalists are more concerned about the well-being of this country when our own journalists who have supervised them are working under duress nearly because there are no jobs. So what happens to a journalist who has been given 1 million shillings to cover election for a month and is with the politicians? So the politician now who manipulate that situation of a journalist gets more coverage. And that is why we are pushing our journalists away from their own competencies. That doctor can address with the training. But how does doctor address the well-being of this journalist where he has gone? He's been taken to Bulisa, he has been taken where food is not easy to come by, but our managers of newsrooms are insensitive to our journalists. And why do I say that? Without that independent media that is capable to work on its own, we're not going to get balanced coverage. There will be a skewed thing. And when we don't see women there, women in Uganda are the least corrupt. Perhaps they pay bribes less. In the newsrooms, women are the least in numbers.
It could be that they are also shy to speak.
Not shy what? There are women who speak here, my friend. Can we talk about Cecilia Ogwana says she's shy to speak? Come on, let's not go there. That's also an assumption by journalists. But women are least corrupt. They are also least in newsroom management, and therefore you will see them always a smaller percentage. Okay. Whether it's a global problem, I don't know. So, but the point is, let us begin to put a torch also in the media, not from the point of a journalist who's in the field, from the point of those who own it. What did you do with your profit? Do you invest in our media?
Owned the newspaper, so maybe he's the right person to speak about this coverage.
I don't want to go away from the assessment Dr. Mwesigye's group has done. For me, even without that assessment, I definitely see a media under a lot of stress to try and meet the political demands of the various candidates. And as a result, the coverage is so cosmetic. It's really to try and say, balance, this so-called balance.
Stopwatch balance.
Sorry. Look, for me, the greatest expectation of any reader right now, since nomination, where is this election headed in terms of outcome? Who is leading in this election, for example? All serious media houses today in the world do what they call opinion polls. But I know the media houses are terrified of doing an opinion poll which will upset some political actors. So they have decided not to do these opinion polls. But there is no way you can run and cover an election for over a month without indicating to the people who is, I mean, all these candidates are moved. What are the voters saying? And it is important because
the has been running an online polling.
But look, forget. Let me develop my point. I have not seen any poll by the New Vision since nomination, by Monitor, by NTV, by anyone. A truly independent poll. What is? I mean, that is one of the major tenets of political reporting of elections. You are kind of a referee. You need to. There has been a goal. There has been a throw in. There has been, the media must do that. But the media is so terrified. I know genuinely the owners cannot allow you to run a poll where, for example, candidate A is going to be No, they are very expensive. But look, I'm sure the media houses can afford. Of course, you cut your clothes. I mean, your code according to your clothes. You can do an opinion poll with fewer respondents. You can find a way of making it cheaper. But at least I'm not enjoying the coverage from a point that we are not getting an indication.
There is some
leading in terms of public opinion.
Dr. Mwesigye, what do you say? I've listened to this non-scientific opinion tracking done by FM radio stations. I listened to that. There's some indication.
No, I've not listened to any which has given an indication.
There's a scientific opinion polling.
Quote one, which
there's scientific opinion polling, but there is also the data tracking. Because even in the West, they do this daily tracking.
But the daily tracking
in the West, published.
Yeah, the daily tracking in the West is still based on the kind of opinion polling that Ona is talking about. It is too scientific. Yeah. You can't rely on these unscientific non-random samples to kind of come up with anything that is credible in terms of predicting an election.
Is that an area of interest for your observation?
Let me just add something. Because the media is not doing this, even ultimately when you have cries of raging, the public has not been prepared to expect that somehow this election may go this way. Everyone is claiming their candidate is going to win, and there is no basis for those claims.
Apparently, the only kind of opinion polling that we see is like in form of who has big crowds.
Well,
that can be
an
question.
Yes.
One, I can't say, I mean, with certainty whether, you know, they are not planning to conduct opinion polls. It is possible that, I mean, this is the first month of the campaigns, actually, official month of campaigns. So it's possible that both New Vision, Monitor, NTV, and others are planning opinion polls for next month, December, and perhaps another one in January. There are also organized groups, you know, civil society and donors who I think are going to definitely fund if at least one opinion poll after nomination. That I can guarantee. Yeah, I mean, citizens need to get a sense of, you know, where, you know, the pulse of, you know, of the politics. I mean, who seems to be leading? I mean, for instance, in May, when the New Vision did its first poll, Mbabazi hadn't done much campaigning, and he was obviously not doing very well in the polls. I mean, has there been any change today? I think that those are questions that are legitimate. They should be, you know, it would add some kind of good value to the conversation if we had some, you know, new opinion poll results. Definitely, yeah.
But you see, Charles,
yes, Chris, if you could just speak a little bit more on the report that they have done. Any surprises in the...
Yes, you see, unless we open up the media to public scrutiny, to how the media operates, unless we create a media, how do you call that, a media awareness from the population, that this is what the media is, and this is how the media ought to operate, we are going to have these problems. Because the public is terrified by the media. Because they can...
Is it?
Yes. Yes. People don't have media education. I'm making it as a journalist, by the way.
Sure.
You make a mistake to attach it to Parliament, I will come back to Parliament. You cannot expect a media to cover women when they already don't think about women. I represent a high-ranking woman personality in this country. That is Honorable Rebecca Kadaga. How many times do you see her in the media? That woman in a week works in so many things. And I've made sure that in our place, at least we send media relatives to every house. No one cares. How many women members of parliament?
Better stop bashing the media.
Someone might ask, someone might ask, how accessible, how available has she been?
I've just told you.
Yes.
My department makes sure that the media is involved. If they are not involved, there is always a press release. But never. And I've gone to newsrooms. So if you are treating a high-ranking woman personality in your country that way, how then are you going to treat a primary school teacher who has opted to go and stand for MP? If you don't think this one matters. So let's open up ourselves and also accept that there are inadequacies in the media, either out of stereotypes or women in this country being the least exposed to public resources to steal, and therefore the men are exposed to it and are able to influence the media.
And by the way, Charles, there's another point that we need to make here, that some of the findings we are sharing now from the print media are going to be, I mean, you know, you're going to sort of see even more extremes when it comes to
radio.
Especially radio. Because one, as you know, radio is the medium with the highest reach in Uganda. But unfortunately, they don't dedicate that much time to news or public affairs. So chances are that if you are saying in print there are not that many sources, women or men, on radio it's going to be worse.
I think I said in another two, maybe 2 or 3 groups.
Yes.
Coverage of special interest groups, especially in relation to this election, because elections of special interest groups have been interesting in one way, that there was a court case that ran for 4 years, only resolved when the processes were midway. The elections for youth leaders was just done last week in Fort Portal. Elections for some of the most controversial, elections of representatives for persons with disabilities, both internally within the political parties and outside the political parties, for persons, for representatives of workers, MPs, is one very controversial. People ask, how come that the representatives only represent one political party or are independent leaning to one political party? Are those some of the things that you're tracking? How do they feature? Because women is a group that should actually be almost on the same footing.
Yeah, we basically track, one of the things we track is sources. Who are the sources in media coverage, and we list them according to so many different categories. For instance, members of parliament, ministers, the president, of course, the candidates themselves, because some are not members of parliament, civil society, donors, police, the electoral commission, other government regulators like the Uganda Communications Commission, and so on and so forth.
The academia?
Academia, experts, name it. Business people, ordinary people, and so on. And what we are saying is that the usual suspects, the politicians, the MPs especially, and maybe the candidates are the dominant sources of news coverage. They're not seeing enough ordinary people, or those you are referring to as interest groups, being represented in this conversation.
Charles, the trend I have noted is that the further you go away from the national perspective, the worse the performance. When you look, like he said of radio, that when they release results of radio, they are likely to be more biased or alarming compared to the newspapers. And I was seeing it with the regional newspapers. In the 2011 media monitoring report that I read, I saw that they performed badly, and I have seen it starting to come up again. So it suggests something that probably the upcountry media houses are more timid or afraid to address some issues.
But Charles, you remember, of course, I'm quite critical of our society's inadequacies, and maybe we are really taking it too much on the media. I don't expect many of the weaknesses in the Ugandan media are the weakness of Ugandan society. So many institutions are decayed, private and public. And only that they don't have the opportunity or the misfortune to have their mistakes
exposed,
like the media. But we are asking a lot from our media. Most of these entities are really poorly managed, which is a general weakness of our society, and maybe it's as well.
I agree with
a lot of soul searching.
On that course, I agree.
Now, but the media can also talk about your article.
The media derives its legal authority from questioning other institutions. And we are saying, for you to question other institutions, who are you? How good are you? So we're not going to say because the other institutions are rotten,
just one eye
then for you come and say, we know. That brings me to the same thing Charles is talking about. The coverage even of parliament itself. On Apito, when you were there, look at your quality. Peter, those fellows are what? But who are you sending to cover?
But there are some good guys in there too.
Very few.
There are some,
Very few.
Yeah.
And the other was discussing.
Because even in our time, there were some people who were good and some who were
I was
not
discussing with
good.
Robert Kabshenga. He came there. I told him, Robert, in the next parliament, I am going to spearhead an accreditation policy, which is going to make you bring to this parliament your best. Because you demand of it a lot. Me a bite. Is that what you are reporting in the parliament?
A bite as something to eat.
Everywhere. And they say, MPs earn what? 25 million. But I'm breaking down that, gentlemen, 25 million means what? They are not able to tell their editors that actually this is the actual pay of an MP. Now the whole public knows there is money in the parliament. Yet the MPs are on pressure. They're on stress. They were buying their liter of fuel at 2,145 shillings.
I've seen an attempt at a breakdown of...
Yes, I broke down those things.
I've seen an attempt at a breakdown of what... I think it's New Vision that did it, of what it will cost the Ugandan taxpayer once we have gone through these elections. And Parliament, I think at 126 billion
and that's where the problem,
in wages.
That's where the problem came from. My article says, government, as we know, Peter Message told, in fact, up to now, when you talk to us about reporting, so what? That thing is not being done in our media today. When you see figures in the New Vision, that is a falsehood. They have gone for the monuments at 25 million per MP. Yet there are MPs like Semuju who comes from Chadondo. His fuel is not the same as Jualuya who comes from Kotido. But you're saying Semuju earns 25 million.
And they're averaging.
It's not even an average. It can't be an average. Because what MP takes home, their subsidy allowance, I put it there. It is 4.5 million a month. Their basic pay, taxable, is 2.6 million. When you put them their housing, it takes them to what the money is 11.5 million. The rest of the money if you have to reach 20 million, depends on your MP from where.
Give us an average. Since you are an insider, give us an average. At the risk of diverting this discussion, because we only have about a minute to...
Yes, I will give it to you.
What, on average, is the total, regardless of what vote, of the itemization, or on average, how much are these MPs earning?
MP, those nearer Kampala, on average, will go home with 17 million. Nearer Kampala, because the mileage
is
that blows
to their
money.
Constituency, yes.
Yes. But the one who comes from Kotido can take 25 million. But the youth MPs take more money than the constituency.
Because they have a national
constituency. Because they have a national constituency.
Yes.
Now, the media should have been breaking this down.
Isn't that in respect of only one youth MP? Because
no,
there is one who has...
Even the one who has a region, the region is bigger.
Okay, so Chris,
so what? So what? The question is, so what? So what? Why the national budget? I brought it for the last 17 years. Appropriation, which is done by Parliament. Government has executive, has got the judiciary and the legislature. So the budget takes care of the three arms of government. For 17 years, the judiciary has been taking an average of 1.75% of the national budget. Parliament, which allocates it, takes 1.70 for 17 years. 96.5% of the national budget goes to the executive. Now, if you're a journalist, who takes more money? And the MPs are saying this money, executive is amorphous. It has to perform education, health, take that money. But you're saying, no, it is the MPs who are taking a lot of money. From figures, which you can verify.
Because they are looking on the basis of the salary rather than other activities.
Now, on the basis, I explained it to you. It's also a fallacy. From government, they are entitled officers, one category of government. A PS has got a vehicle. A commissioner, stand director, some even principal, even senior people get government vehicles. Government buys new vehicles, doesn't buy old second-hand vehicles. If they buy for Mwangusha, who's a principal in the Ministry of Energy vehicle, it is more than 100 million. And Mwangusha, government will repair that vehicle for you. It will pay for you a driver. It will fuel for you at the current fuel price. But for an MP, government gives an MP 103 million for 5 years to buy a second-hand vehicle. They hire a driver, they go to the garage. If you knock it, no more vehicle until next parliament. Who is costly?
Do you think that is
who is costly? The crisis for parliament, which I hope I see you are digging deeper and you should be able to overcome it, it's perception of value. That's the crisis.
Yes.
People have heard of the head of KCCA earning 40-something million, the head of URA earning, so many guys earning a lot of money, but nobody ever questioned.
Because of the value.
Wrong perception from your corner that these people are taking this money and they don't deserve it. That's the problem.
Gentlemen,
not that they are taking a lot of money.
I'm going to have an opportunity.
What kind of governance do you want? If you think the MP takes a lot of money, you don't even better to know. The same MP who has given money to executive for roads, for hospitals, you are asking him, even if he says, I will love you for a road, is here, they will ask him, where is it from your
I'm going to hopefully have an opportunity. Maybe this platform may not offer that opportunity to interview you in your capacity as Director of Public Affairs.
No, don't interview, engage me. Yes, I want engagement.
Hear that civil society language.
I want to engage journalists on this one.
Yes,
Chris, welcome to the party. Sending somebody.
I am defending facts. They are there. I'm not doing propaganda.
I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity when we can, I can interrogate your position, because once you have said that of all those members of parliament, in your estimation there are only about 40 who qualified to be called honorable.
Do you know why?
Yes.
The legislation aspect of in the article I'm saying citizens are invited to critique their MPs. They must get value for money in terms of what they are called legislation. Do you know how many bills this parliament has passed since it came into place? Do you have reporters there? They don't say it. In their own work.
I'm saying.
Hold on.
I'm saying.
If I say they are 40.
Hold it.
Hold on. If I say they are 40, I am talking in terms of the capacity to comprehend policy dynamics.
Okay.
Bring a law, pass it
what I'm saying
in a better
is,
form.
We'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to discuss that. For now, our time is up. We need to get out of here.
This is like Donald Trump.
I want us to engage ourselves in providing the public.
Our time is out.
Dr. Messi says that provide information.
Just let's be fair. this issue he was saying that so what and all that. I mean, for me, the principle really here is the principle of Parliament determining its own, emoluments. And my understanding was that that was one of the safeguards of the separation of power, the principle of separation of powers. Now, the Parliament, and I think many of us wouldn't mind if the price to pay for Parliament to be independent is for the MPs to earn that much money, so be it. The crisis for Uganda is that even after they get what many of us think is very good money, there is no guarantee of independence. In fact, there is no evidence of independence.
Thank you.
For the executive.
I actually think one of the major problems is that when members of parliament get into that house and forget to do what they were sent there to do, they end up carrying a burden they shouldn't be carrying. If they put the executive on tenterhooks to deliver on the promises and hold it to account, then they wouldn't suffer the burden of becoming the educators of their villages, the funeral service of their villages,
ambulances. When
and
Chris was still on this side, I told him that MPs actually needed more money. If you were to give each MP 1 billion.
I have said.
Even the power to determine their money is being taken away. So
I have said I am going to. I hopefully will have an opportunity to interview Chris and compare the Chris with interrogate Chris.
I am ready for interrogation.
Nominations for members of parliament. So this is not outside the 2016 and the media, because nominations for members of parliament are next week. Actually, this week, if you count from Sunday. They are on this week on 3rd and 4th, and we'll be watching that closely, and we'll keep you up to speed. Because now I think the scope expands. We have nominated members of presidential candidates who are in the field looking for votes. And you have nominated members of parliament in the field looking for votes.
And local councils.
And local councils, LC.
That's for chopper.
And government owns them.
We look back and ask, did you defend them before or did you criticize them before? Before you criticize the journalists who are criticizing them today. Gentlemen, our time is out.
First of all,
Chris,
you must know.
Our time is out.
I have an appointment letter.
Chris, our time is out.
You work in Sedu. You cannot go and go against the appointment letter of Sedu because you are in monitor.
That I understand. Thank you very much. Our time is out. Thank you very much, Chris Obore, for the show. Thank you very much. Gerald Walulia for making
I am very happy to defend the parliament.
Thank you very much. Honour Peter Comrade and Dr. Peter Musige. Thank you very much to you all our viewers for joining us tonight for this edition of The Fourth Estate. Have a good night.